meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. All right. Well, Beau, it is really good to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Jamie. Great to be here.
You are so welcome. I want to let our listeners know how we got connected. But before we do that, so Beau, I just got on LinkedIn like a couple weeks ago.
Great.
And I just followed you. Thank you. Thank you. It feels like where the big kids hang out.
Yeah. Great.
But I noticed on yours, I like the things you have in there, the hashtags. You have leadership. These are things you care about. Faith at work, paradigm shift, change leadership, and work-life integration. So that's just a little bit. I want you to tell our listeners like how we got connected, but also give some context to who you are, what you care about.
Love it. Okay. So it might be helpful just to give a 30-second summary of how I got to what I'm doing.
Great.
Which I spent 9 years working in public higher education, working with college students. Loved that world. Then our family was part of planting or starting a nonprofit organization in our community, which was a local church. And loved that experience as well. Very quickly in that experience, realized we didn't know what we were doing. And so when I got an opportunity to go work for a large church and really learn leadership there. And what I found there is that the leadership is the thing that I just lights me up. Helping leaders figure out how to wrestle through their values, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and their priorities and how to make decisions in line with their values. Whether they're faith-based or not. And then got an opportunity to work for a guy whose name is Pat Lencioni. And really what we do is come alongside leaders to promote the dignity of each person at work and promote environments where humans can flourish. And so anyway, that's what I get to do. And Jamie, I think you reached out because you'd heard of my boss, Pat, and then I saw what you were doing, and we'll, I'm sure, get into our foster journey, but we've been foster parents for a number of years and just knew we needed to connect, and we did. And I was basically our first connection trying to tell you, sorry, we can't really work together. We're really busy. And then was so captivated by the story of what you all are doing that we've gotten to stay connected.
Yeah, I remember you said, I'm going to tell you some things you might not like to hear. And I think you should maybe not do this, or I forget, you gave me like some no's, and then you gave me kind of an option, something that I could do. And you're like, now, how's that feel? Did I just discourage you or whatever? And I'm like, I'm exhilarated. Like I'm going after the thing you talked about.
I love it.
So I love the table group. I don't talk about that much on this podcast, but like you, Beau, I'm kind of I consider myself a leadership like junkie, because I didn't go to school to become a leader. I went to school for child development. I fell into this leadership really unexpectedly, right? I had a passion. I followed that passion, and it led me to becoming an organizational leader. And so I've learned everything I do by reading books and talking to people and trying and failing and trying again. And I just remember, I've told you this, but when I first heard Patrick talk at a leadership conference, I remember it was the first time I thought, wait, maybe God didn't make a mistake when he called me a leader. Maybe I can do this. So the table group has just been incredibly impactful to me, all of your resources. So that's where I was so excited to get connected with you. And it's just been a cool friendship.
I love it. Jamie, this is a weird thing to do live, but it will be interesting to me and maybe interesting to your listeners. Tell me about your listeners. Take 15 seconds and tell me who is listening. Like, as we have this conversation, who's in our heads as if they were in the room listening to us?
Yeah. We have a lot of foster parents who are listening. We have people who are just in the trenches that are weary, that listen and find courage to keep going. We also have workers in the field who are encouraged that we're sharing these things and that we're bringing that perspective. We also have kids who've grown up in care. I mean, I got to know a girl who was 16 listening. She was in foster care and listening, and we were able to connect later on. And I mean, just really cool people. And then people who are just interested in this world, who maybe aren't foster parents, but want to help others. I mean, and I know this because we hear from them. We get to hear from our listeners and we talk with them. And they're just awesome people.
I love it. That is so helpful. And like I mentioned, we've been foster parents for 12 years in 3 different states. And thank you, everybody who's listening. You're in the trenches.
Yeah, man.
And whether you currently have a kiddo with you, or you're in a season of a break, or you're mentoring or helping serve other families, it takes a village.
Yeah,
and this work in particular takes a village, and really takes. I always think about it. I want to run at such a pace that I can finish the race, and I hope that that's true for everybody that's listening. That they're attending to their own pace, so that you can have a long-term view. Right,
the whole marathon versus sprint mentality.
Oh yeah, okay, but let me flip that on its head. I hear this a lot of like, oh, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I think, unfortunately, if you've never run a marathon, like I've never run a marathon,
nor have
you just think, oh, that just means you just run, and you just keep running and running and running. And I love this quote by Michael Johnson, who won the 400 meters in the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. And he broke all the world records at that time. And he said, life is often compared to a marathon, but I think it's closer to a sprint.
Oh, okay.
And here's what a sprint is. He says, a sprint is long periods of training with brief opportunities to perform at your best.
Oh, that's
good. If you think about the work that you do in your personal mission, or the thing that you want to help carry in the world, I think about passion is really, what are you willing to help be responsible for? What is the problem in the world that you're willing to help carry? If you think about that like a marathon, you will put pressure on yourself to just keep running, just keep running, just keep running, just keep running. Well, let's remember marathon, the word marathon comes from the Battle of Marathon that was 26.2 miles away from Athens or wherever. And the person who ran the very first marathon ran 26.2 miles back to tell somebody the battle is won, and then they collapsed and died.
Oh,
so like the idea of a marathon is like what is often short-sighted. It feels like, oh, it's about grit and determination and and I love that mindset of long periods of training. All of life is training with brief opportunities to perform at your best. And, this is hard to say to folks like us who you're in a fight and it doesn't feel like they're brief opportunities. They feel like they're long opportunities where you have to perform at your best. But I would just share that mindset and share some permission, like I'm sure lots of people on your podcast have done. Share some permission to really name what are you responsible for, and to name what you are not responsible for. And
this is huge. What are you responsible to versus what are you responsible? I guess this is my question. Yeah. What would you say about the difference between what are you responsible to versus what are you responsible, or who are you responsible for?
That's a really interesting question that I would love to reflect on personally. Even the people that I'm responsible to, if I were to write, I have 9 rules for life. And one of my 9 rules for life is about parenting. And my rule about parenting is going to sound like I'm an insensitive human, but it's don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. We have 4 biological children, and they rebel, they disobey, they fuss and whine and complain and try to sabotage my plans and my life. Okay. And they sometimes embarrass me, and it's like, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
And so when you have that mindset and then you invite another human to come and live in your house,
yeah,
you can love them deeply. You can serve them open-handedly and know their I'd call it sin, their mess, the brokenness they maybe inherited, might not be yours to carry. In fact, I'm going on a bunch of rants here, Jamie, but I increasingly believe that we can't change people. People don't change people. But what we can do is stay connected to people and change ourselves. And continue to get emotionally and physically and spiritually healthy and be connected to other people and stay connected. The temptation is, now I'm working with my hands and none of your viewers can see my hands.
No, because we're on YouTube. We're on YouTube now. So watch.
The temptation is to swing to one of two sides. And one side of the fence is, oh, I'm going to be responsible for that person and I'll be a crutch to them and they need me.
Yeah.
And then what we sometimes do, especially people like me, is then we swing to the other side and say, I can't do that. I can't be responsible for them. So I'll just be disconnected.
Right.
And what we actually do is we stay connected without being responsible for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And really to name that. So, boy, I didn't anticipate us already going there, but those are a few things that I'm thinking about today. I know you have some other questions, but what do you think about all that?
This is great. Yeah, I love it. And for me, the reason I asked about the responsible to versus responsible for, and I think it's really the same thing you were saying. What are you responsible for? What are you not? Is I remember when I was going through a hard season where I had to make some hard decisions that, I remember someone reminding me, Jamie, you are responsible to love people, show respect, kindness, right? Compassion, but you're not responsible for how they respond, or what they do with the information you give them or things like that. And same with our kids. I'm responsible to love them, right? To be there, to be committed to them, right? As I'm responsible to keep them safe, right? Have a roof over their head, all those things, right?
Yep.
But I'm not responsible for how they respond. I'm not responsible for the choices they make. And I think especially as our kids have gotten into teenage years and we've worked with other people who we love and who've made some hard choices, things that have grieved us, and we've been part of their journey, I have worn that weight of it's my fault. And I've had to give that back up and say, no, because it's not my fault. And it's also, I'm not the one who changed them. Like you said too, I'm not the savior either.
That's right.
I'm me, and I'm very limited, and I get a partner with the people in my life. But I don't change, like you said, I don't change them. And
there's freedom on both sides of that, because when another way we actually talk about this in a business context or a leadership context is you can control inputs. You can't control outputs.
Sure.
And so what that does is it gives you freedom to know, when the outputs are really great, my response is, praise God. Yeah. Fantastic. I'm so grateful. It's just a position of gratitude of, I'm so glad that happened. Not look at me. I'm the one who made that happen.
Right.
And vice versa. It gives me some permission that even when we made the right inputs, you don't always get the right outputs.
Right.
And every single person listening to this podcast knows that.
Right.
Because you could walk through a children's hospital cancer ward and know many of these parents did all of the right inputs and they got a really, really terrible output that they're having to deal with right now. And there are some things that I do poorly, of course, the inputs that I choose that are wrong, and still things end up going okay, and vice versa.
Yeah,
so I just work to control the inputs. And let's riff on that for a little bit, Jamie, because then the question is, what inputs do you put in? Because here's the reality is when you say yes to foster care, you don't know this when you first say yes to it. It means that you are going to end up saying no to a lot of other things. And like a lot of your listeners, what that meant for us, do we just can we just keep it real on this podcast? Was that a thing that we do? Okay.
That is what we do.
So our first foster placement, let me go through a few of our journeys. Our first foster placement was a 15-year-old who we picked up from jail. We can talk about that story at some point. Our next foster placement was a little black baby. He was so cute, and we'd walk through the grocery stores, and we were in the South, and there was something sort of acceptable about the fact that a white family is carrying around this little black baby. There was lots of smiles, and then, and I hate that this is true, but let's just talk about what's true. Then we had a Latino boy, and he was 4 years old. And people looked at us like we were dirty. And we stopped getting invited over to people's houses. And these are things that you don't know are going to happen when you say yes to foster care. You probably know, it's going to take some time. And you can't anticipate all of the different losses that are going to happen. So let's name a few of those losses. Sometimes there's a loss of identity. There's a loss of relationships. There's a loss of some of your future. There's a loss of some sense of control. There can be a loss of your sense of your turf. I'm stealing all of these from a guy named William Bridges who wrote a book about transitions. And he said, it's so important to be able to name what you're losing. So what I have found is so helpful in that is to be able to also to name what I'm clinging to. And the word that we use there for our family is we're going to cling to our values. And so what we have done over the last couple of years that's been so helpful for us in decision making is to really name and clarify what are our family values. And I can tell you a little bit about how we did that. And then what that does when you have named them is you're willing to say, this is what's essential. And other things, it's okay if they're non-essential. These are the things that we're going to say yes to. It's okay if other things fall by the wayside. Because left on our own, our default is to compare ourselves to others and to just borrow the values of the people around us. Let me pick on some people. Like that can be like, oh, everybody else is doing travel baseball. I guess we should do travel baseball. Everybody else is going for a week at the beach. I guess we should go for a week at the beach. Everybody else is buying new cars. I guess we should, whatever the thing is.
Right.
And you might be chasing somebody else's values. And it's just been so helpful and clarifying to name our values. And then the way we talk about it as a family is we're going to place big bets on those values. We're going to make big, and I like calling them bets because it is like, I don't know if it's going to work.
Because it's not for sure.
It's not for sure. Like the best thing that we heard in foster care training is assume 9 out of 10 stories are heartbreaks. But we're just going to place big bets in the direction of our values and live with the consequences. Because now some of that's my wiring, but some of it is it's just so helpful and clear to be able to know what am I doing and what should I keep pursuing.
Right. Because we're not limitless. We don't have all the time in the world. We have to choose, our priorities. And like you said, if you don't ever name them or think through them, you won't choose them because the easy and what we see will always come first.
The immediate and expedient will take precedent over what is ultimate and what matters to you most.
Right.
And until we name what matters to us most, we will always default to what matters right now.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah,
well, you can keep going, but I have a question.
Do it.
Okay. What are those family values? I want to know what yours are.
Okay. Our family values are be together, be healthy, be outside, be adventurous. They're not perfect. They work really well for us. They actually started, Jamie, by us asking, what are the filter that we want to use for what we're going to do on the weekend?
That's great.
And we said, this weekend, we want to be healthy. We want to be together. We want to be outside. And we have little, be healthy encompasses lots of things, be together, be outside. And then our kids demanded that we add be adventurous.
I love that.
So we place bets in the direction of those values. But, the way that we did that, let me describe that process. If you right now in Google were to search for value sort, you'd find a bunch of people who've made things like this. You don't need to make it up on your own. Or you can print off a list of about 80 different values, 50 different values. Brene Brown has a list in her book, Dare to Lead, that's super helpful. And you just circle ones that are always values, are maybe values, and are never values. And you take your always values and you get that list down to about 15. Then you get it down to about 5. And you kind of try to get it down to 3.
Yeah.
Brene Brown would say you got to get it down to 2.
Yeah.
And you do that with your kids, and you do it over time because you got to let it marinate a little bit. And you ask your 4-year-old to draw a picture about it, or you print off different pictures and ask them to circle different ones. And it's so fun. And then they're part of it, and they feel like, oh, we got to name this thing that's important to us.
Yeah.
So those are ours.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to hear our family values?
Oh, I would love to. I didn't want to put you on the spot if you didn't have them. Yeah. What are they?
We do and we also, again, like learning leadership, so many leadership principles are transcendent. I mean, they're home principles, they're family principles, they're life principles,
Couldn't agree
right?
more. Almost every leadership book could be a parenting book.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was like, man, I pour so much into our team, and I want to make sure we're creating vision and setting mission for our family and having values. And so my husband and I invited all of our kids to come to TFI and to the conference room, and we sat around and we just talked through what matters to our family. Also, my husband's a small business owner, so he showed them the state of the business. Because one of our values is generosity. And so we determined that if we make more than a certain percentage or a certain number, we are going to give everything else away. And we got really excited with the kids, and they started praying like for the business that we would grow, because we knew that if we grew enough, we could have super fun things to give away. So anyways, our values are, that's so funny. I'm about to say our TFI core values. The first one is faithfulness to God, and then loyalty to each other. Then we have generosity to others and gratitude back to God. So those are ours.
I love it. Okay. This is part of what I do for a living, is help companies identify and name values. Yesterday, I was with a team helping them sort through theirs. So let's talk to families about values. This is fun.
Yeah.
So there are 4 kinds of values. And the idea is to get to like a core value. And a core value is something that would distinguish you from somebody else. That it would be like, what is it that makes, my last name's Johnson, the Johnsons. Right. But there's 3 kind of competing values that can get distracting. One is an aspirational value. That is something that you wish was true about you, but really isn't. So if we were to say, let's see, what would ours be for our family? We are academics. That would be an aspirational value for us, of like, oh yeah, that'd be great someday if we were. So we're going to make that our value in hopes that we become that way. Or another value that might be sort of not quite fitting for us would be, we're frugal. It's like, well, that's not exactly true. That I kind of wish that we were more, but we're not really exactly that way.
Sure.
So a family that would say we are outdoorsy, that just isn't going to be authentic to you. Yeah. The second kind of value would be an accidental value. That would be something that you fell into by accident, that you're like, it actually does, we kind of wish it wasn't that way. For example, we never take days off, or we don't rest very well, or like, now you're not going to be very tempted to make an aspirational value or core value, but I think it's good to kind of know the difference. Yeah, and then the third for a family, I think, would be the one that would get them in the most trouble, which would be the third kind of value, is a permission to play. And here's what happens to families is, if you have a mission, or you've clarified like something that you're chasing, then you might say and I'm not picking on anybody, but like your permission to play value might be like, we're plugged into a church. Or permission to play value might be, we do our homework, which is like, yeah, it's not really, that's like, you got to do that anyway. So for a lot of companies, they'll try to have integrity or honesty, sustainability be their values, which are fine things to chase, but they're kind of like, yeah, you just kind of have to be on time to have a job. So on time isn't punctuality. And that's like the lamest value I've ever heard in my life. So you want your values to be something that help your kids and family know this is who we are, in particular, because you're saying yes, whether you're respite or mentoring or serving or giving or currently having a kid live in your house. Right. You're living differently than everybody else. Yes. You're living differently than everybody else is. And it's helpful for your kids to know why.
Yeah, absolutely. And have that input and buy-in for that we're going to do this thing together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for us, that's where like the whole generosity that comes with money, but it also comes with our time and our lives. You know, that's why we're willing to have people in. That's why we open up our arms and we have honorary caves, you know, because we have lots of people who become part of our family because that's our values. We are generous to others, and it's, you know, things like that. So
that's so good. Okay, I have ideas of things that I think would be fun to talk about, but you have questions also. So
this is great. This is how my podcasts go. I have questions, but I like to go with how the conversation is flowing. So if there is something that is on your mind right now, let's go for it.
Well, there is something that's on my mind, and I'm going to work it out live with you right now here on the podcast, which is part of what we do at the table group, which I might sort of uniquely get to speak to your audience about, is our newest concept is called the 6 Types of Working Genius. And you could Google it, and you can Google Pat Lencioni and learn all about it. And the interest here's the 60-second summary is that there are 6 different types of work that are required for everything that we do. Whether you're planting a garden, planting a church, planning a vacation. And we are given by God the ability to get joy, energy, fulfillment from 2 of those. And 2 of them we're okay at, and 2 of them really frustrate us. And I wrote down on my notes here, like, how do we talk about fatigue and burnout? Because it's so real, and it's so disingenuous to say, you should just take a break. Or make sure that you Sabbath. And we're going, yeah, but this kid that I'm with is still wetting the bed and still having tantrums. And so easier said than done.
Right.
And it's been very helpful for my wife, Nicole, and I to know what are the things for each other that give us joy and fulfillment and energy, and what are the things that drain us. Because as parents, we got to do all 6. But it's so helpful to know what things you need to gear up for. And you're just pouring out because you love them and you got to pour out. And which things are actually going to give me joy and energy. And then what I can do about that is be intentional to schedule my weekend. I can actually be intentional to know how to ask for help when I understand those 6 different types of work.
Yes.
So I could go through those, but I don't know that I need to. Your listeners could literally Google workinggenius.com and you could go find it and take the assessment.
But you know that I am a huge Working Genius fan.
I do know that, as am I. So let's
we need to talk just a little bit because Beau and I actually share the exact same 2 geniuses.
We do. So let's actually do this live where we'll like coach you about your geniuses as a foster parent and parent.
Okay.
So there are 6 types of working genius. Let me go through them. And they go in order. And listeners, you can kind of picture that they start at a higher elevation, and then they end kind of like boots on the ground. And higher elevation, I mean like thinking about bigger pictures. And then slowly as you move through the progression, you get more to where it's more tactical. Because work starts with like a big idea and ends with application.
Yeah.
So here are the 6 types. All work starts with wonder. That is, people with the genius of wonder ask big questions. They see opportunities and potential. And they ask, is there a better way of doing this? Does our family need a vacation right now? I wonder if my kid maybe has an artistic bent to them. Or maybe there's a potential here for a new relationship. Then the next genius is invention, which responds to that question and say, oh, I have an idea about that. Or what if we tried this? Not all ideas are good ideas, though. And the next genius is the genius of discernment. That is the ability to evaluate and refine those ideas. And know, often without data or even an answer of like how I know that it's the right one, which one is the right one.
Right. It's like that gut feeling.
That's that gut feeling.
Yeah.
Then we need, after discernment, to galvanize. So wonder, invention, discernment, galvanize. Galvanize is rallying people around that decision together. But people like you and me who are galvanizers, we can't just stop there because the next work is figuring out how do I get it? How do I support that decision? How do I help? How do I make sure people are included? That's the genius of enablement. And then finally, the last genius is tenacity, which is that high standard, get it across the finish line genius.
Yes.
So let's think about parenting. Parenting requires all 6. Our attentiveness to our kids, new ideas about what to do, discerning like who they are and like what we should be doing as a family. Rallying your kids. I watch my wife, we homeschool our kids, and she's constantly having to galvanize them. Get your shoes on, get your homework done.
Yeah.
You know, practice your soccer. There's tons of enablement. I got to help you blow your nose and tie your shoes and help you and sit with you in the cry, and lots of tenacity. So what are your frustrations, Jamie? Let's start there.
My
What are the two
frustrations
that are
are,
your lowest?
yeah, wonder and tenacity. The two ends.
So what that means is you don't naturally see the opportunities or potential, and you get very drained by the tasks where you have to get things across the finish line.
Oh, yeah.
So the first thing that you would do when you realize that is to tell your husband.
Yeah.
Step one, hey, this is what I've learned about myself. Step two would be you'd have him take it, and you would know what his frustrations
Done and done.
What are his frustrations? What are the two that are the lowest, the most draining for him?
Oh, shoot. What are his lowest?
And while you're thinking about it, the picture here, listeners, is like your geniuses are like a thermos, like a Yeti that can keep coffee hot a long time. And your frustration, your competencies, the ones in the middle, is like a normal Starbucks cup of coffee, just in a paper cup.
Right.
But the frustrations are like you had a hole in the bottom of that cup of coffee and just drains you so fast.
Yeah.
So, Jamie, you've got a bunch of kids. You've got a lot of tenacity work. You're likely to be grumpy and frustrated and irritable when you have too much tenacity work to do. Yeah, you are. And I am too. Tenacity is a frustration.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
And then the other thing that's likely to be true for you, did you think of what are your husband's frustrations? It's okay if you didn't.
I know his geniuses, but I'm pretty sure his frustrations would be invention. And the one I'm not sure about is probably wonder, actually.
Okay.
It's probably invention and wonder.
So let's just talk about you for a minute. Your geniuses are invention and galvanizing, which means thank God for every kid, every relationship. They are going to come to you and you're going to have bright ideas and energy about those ideas. You're going to be able to rally people around those ideas. And your kids need that from you. The people in your life really need, especially, like they want your invention. They want your ideas. Hey, what do you think we could do about this? They need your galvanizing. They need you to be able to give them energy. It's one of the greatest gifts that you can give them, and God put you on the planet to help do that. And see, what's happening is some of you listeners are like, oh, I don't have that. Or some of you are going, oh, I think I have that, or my husband has that. And we need words to be able to affirm each other. And we need to know, like, this is part of what you're put on the planet to do, is to give that genius away, to give it to people, and then to know where you can ask for help. Just crossing those I's and dotting those T's. I know you can't believe it, but there are people who love it.
Totally.
And would love to serve you and your family and your ministry and the people around you by helping you do that.
Yes. And I mean, speaking for myself, I have those incredible people around me, which is why, one, TFI even exists to this day. If it was just me 11 years ago, when we started, it would have finished in about a year, you know, but God has brought the people to carry it across and continue. That's the same with my husband. This is his tenacity is his genius. And this is why he can drive us to Florida every year and drive 18 of the 20 hours. And when I step into the driver's seat and try to help in 45 minutes, I'm going, honey, I'm struggling.
That's good.
So,
you know, there's a lot to say about that. I think the overarching thing I want to communicate is permission. And to say all of us have felt guilt because of our frustrations.
Yes.
And just knowing them can help put some better words around that and give this community a little more permission there.
Absolutely. Well, Beau, we're going to actually have to start. We have about 5 minutes. We need to start wrapping up. So I want to give you the opportunity to really speak. I mean, just kind of wrap this up and leave our listeners with some encouragement, things they can take with them. I think they've already received some of that, but I'll give the floor to you right now.
So here's what I would say to you listeners. And I don't know how many of you are Jesus people or interested in the Bible, but let me tell you a quick story from the scriptures, which is Jesus, who you've heard of, had a brother named James. And it's unbelievable that you could actually go and read a little letter that James, Jesus' brother, wrote. How cool is that? And one of the things that James says is this. He says, pure religion, like religion that's like the right way. And religion probably, and in many ways bothers all of us because it's impure. and it's kind of sticky and it's full of messy people. And of course it's sticky and messy. But he says pure religion is this: it's taking care of widows and orphans in their distress. Isn't that so interesting? And I've thought, like, how does he know that? How does James know that that is actually what pure religion is? And I'm not getting the verse exactly right. You should go look it up. It's in James 1. And he says, like, the religion that our Father in heaven sees as faultless. Okay, James, how do you know that? How did you know that religion is, like, the best form of religion is caring for people who are in their distress? And then I thought about James' life. And here's what we know about James. Is Jesus was not his brother. It was his stepbrother. And Joseph is James' actual, Joseph and Mary, you've heard of them. Although Mary is Jesus' mom, Joseph is his adopted dad. Yeah. Joseph allowed a kid who wasn't his own kid to live in his house and grow up in his house. And James watched Joseph do that. He watched him, like, teach Jesus how to hammer and saw and fish. And he watched him treat him like he was one of his own. Joseph actually dies pretty young. And he isn't around to hear James write this letter and be able to read it. And I just think, like, if you were to ask James, how do you know, like, what real religion is? I think James would say, it's not because of what I watched my brother do. It's not because of what I watched my mom do. I watched my dad. That's how I know what real religion is because I watched my dad model. Somebody that wasn't his kid, loving them, serving them, taking all the heat. There's multiple times in scripture where, like, in the stories of Jesus, that they're taking heat as a family because of who Jesus was. And I think about this all the time of, like, you have no idea who's watching. You have no idea who's watching your decision to say yes and give when nobody else is saying yes to give, and to do something that's totally abnormal, and to watch your own kids rebel against it, and to miss out on, golf trips and vacations and long nights of sleep, and to miss, for some of you who serve, this is your full-time job, like, who've taken less pay, and you just have no idea who's watching. And that's our story. Is the only reason that we're in foster care is because my best friend and his wife said yes to foster care, and we got to watch, and it was so compelling and captivating that we decided to say yes. So in the days where you're burnt out and it does feel like a marathon, or the days that you're in the sprint that the laps just keep going, just be encouraged. You have no idea who's watching. And the goal isn't that you do it perfectly. The goal is that you continue to show up.
Oh, that's awesome. I've never thought of it like that. That's so awesome.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on today. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and there's so much more we could talk about. Maybe we'll have to have you back. Would you come back?
Great. Of course. Yes, Jamie, it's great to see you. Thank you, everybody who's listening. We're grateful for you. You're doing good work.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.